Zach from the Try Guys got married, but he also had a terrible medical experience that we need to talk about. You may have seen me on Eat the Menu with Keith, but it's time to tackle Zach's medical concern. Let's get started. Be-whoop!
I stabbed myself with a 4.5 centimeter shard of glass in the leg a month before my wedding.
Why did he do that? I'm hoping this was an accident.
So I take some picture frames and I decide to tuck them behind this treadmill that we never use.
Treadmills are so incredibly dangerous. Obviously, I've seen how many injuries they cause, but I feel like many people have seen how many injuries they cause, and serious ones, because of the huge situation surrounding Peloton throughout the pandemic when they released their treadmill, and actually young children were getting caught underneath them.
So I'm power walking on the treadmill, I'm at the end of my 35 minutes, and my legs are going back and forth, back and forth.
I know where this is gonna go.
And back, boom. I feel this electric shock just radiate, shoot through my foot. I feel 1,000 tiny needles stab the bottom of my foot. I would later learn that this feeling is the shard of glass rubbing up against my nerve.
Nerve pain is very unique. It's like electric, it spreads, it radiates.
There's this tiny piece of glass sticking out of my leg. We remove the glass, we stop the bleeding, and we go, okay, I think it's okay.
But it's not okay. If there's a cut, you still should get it treated because that's significantly deep of a cut and it's with a non-clean surface. So if a patient comes into my office with that, we decide whether or not the patient would benefit from an updated tetanus vaccine or a booster. So there's things that we need to keep in mind here, especially with the depth that I imagine it happened with.
4.5 centimeter shard of glass in my leg?
Ow.
I'm gonna make this part as quick as possible because we were at UCLA ER for 18 hours.
Wow.
They have me in this makeshift room, which is in the lobby with just like paper curtains around me.
That's not, that sounds terrible, obviously, for Zach. But in reality, a lot of our inner city hospitals, especially the ERs, are so filled up that we have people in the hallways with no curtains, with no privacy.
I'm getting x-rays, I'm getting CAT scans, I'm getting something called contrast, which makes your CAT scan more effective, which also makes you feel like you're peeing yourself. That's fun.
Contrast is basically an agent that you insert into your blood vessels through an IV, and it then allows us to get a better visualization when we're looking for things that require blood supply.
And then 3 different bedside doctors come and they go, I think I can give this a shot, and they just numb me and are wiggling around inside my leg trying to get the frickin' piece of glass out.
So I don't know what exactly the area, it's hard to tell from that image where the shard of glass is, but the fact that it's near his Achilles tendon makes me worried. It makes me worried for functionality of the tendon. Obviously, the Achilles tendon is very important when we're walking. It's what allows you to push off and take that step, gives your calf muscle attachment to the foot, but also because of its depth, you have a lot of blood vessels there, nerves, as well as bone. That can lead to an osteomyelitis, which is an inflammation due to an infection of the bone, and that requires IV antibiotics and an extended hospital stay.
And we're going, hey, maybe we should go into go to the surgery team, and they're like, I got it.
Surgery team, or maybe the ortho team.
And then they're like, oh, I don't got it. 3 times.
Ouch.
The surgery team comes by and they say, hey, we're bringing you upstairs. Time to cut you open. I wake up from the greatest nap of my life. And I immediately text my friends and family this photo and say, I lived, bitch.
That's a confident person right there.
The next few weeks would be spent icing and elevating and resting. During this time, Maggie was taking great care of me. My friends were taking care of me.
I believe he was also in a previous video talking about how he has an autoimmune condition.
I got diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis,
where he was taking a medication that could potentially make you immunocompromised or immunosuppressed so that it could raise the chance of you developing an infection.
I actually had to get off my medicine. That's something that I wasn't able to fit in the video. It is the most wound healing inhibiting medicine that you could ever be on. So for 2 months, I had to get off my medicine, which caused a whole other slew of problems with my arthritic symptoms. But it also caused a lot of complications for the healing itself.
Oh no. Oh,
I'm just gonna cut to the chase and tell you it got infected.
Oh.
The skin is big and puffy and red and oozing.
It's likely that a cellulitis has formed as a result of a postoperative complication. In patients who have recently undergone medical procedures or have spent time in the hospital, we consider those patients to be high risk for the development of cellulitis from MRSA, which changes the type of antibiotics that you choose, because MRSA means methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, and in those situations, you need to use a medication like doxycycline or clindamycin that have some MRSA coverage.
Your boy was growing not one, but 2 infections. 2 bugs inside my leg. Very cool. MSSA.
All right, so this is interesting. He has MSSA, which is methicillin sensitive, which means that you don't need to use the 2 antibiotics I mentioned earlier. It's one that is sensitive to other antibiotics, the ones we use more commonly.
And serratia.
It's serratia, not sore.
Did you call me out for spelling serratia wrong?
Serratia is usually what we call an opportunistic or nosocomial infection, which means opportunistic, that when you're immunocompromised, like if you're on a medication for an autoimmune condition, you're undergoing chemotherapy, when you have a dropped immune system, a weaker immune system, that's when that bacteria is able to overcome your body's natural defenses. And then nosocomial means that you get it in the hospital, because that's where that bacteria tends to be more found. These are not things that you would generally need to even worry about as a patient. This is more so for us when we get our cultures back, we actually grow this bacteria in a culture, in a medium, and then the report will tell us which bacteria is present, and then what antibiotics this bacteria is resistant to and sensitive to, so we can choose the right approach. And generally, when someone is very sick in the hospital, like really sick, we start with a very broad set of antibiotics, meaning broad so that they work on many different bacteria. We call them big guns in the hospital. And then once we get the cultures and sensitivities back, we can then narrow down the spectrum of activity. And the reason we do it this way is very strategic. I'll kind of do like a war reference. If you're using an antibiotic that treats all type of bacteria, it's like you're dropping a giant nuke. So lots of collateral damage to the human body. If you find out what the culture sensitivities are, you can do a very targeted, like laser guided strike that goes right to the source of the bacteria, and there's much less collateral damage.
Okay, let's speed run this. I get another CAT scan, I have a hematoma and a big old cluster of infection in my leg.
So hematoma is not surprising given the fact that there was so much blood loss. Hematoma is essentially a walled off section of blood. It can happen after trauma.
Not to mention 3 pieces of glass they missed the first time. I get another surgery. I lived, bitch, part 2. They flushed the wound out. They put this thing called a Pemrose. It's like a forbidden boba straw sticking out of my leg. It helps the wound drain and not get infected again.
When wounds don't drain well, what happens is your body wants to naturally protect itself from the infectious agent, and it creates a section around the infection. It creates like a pocket. That's what basically an abscess is. But when that happens, now you're stuck with that pocket of bacteria that can A, grow, or B, if it ruptures at any moment, it can be a surgical emergency. So that if you keep a drain in, all the bad stuff can keep coming out of your body while your body continues to fight off the infection.
My wonderful wife had to pack my wound every single day. I had a 4.5 centimeter hole in my leg. We wanted to keep that open. We didn't want it to heal over on the top. So she would take a sterilized Q-tip and some sterilized gauze and like poke into my hole twice a day, every day, including on our wedding day. This time, they keep me in the hospital for 4 days. At this point, I start filming a little more at the hospital because I was bored.
Hey, Keith.
All right, so his pulse is quite high there, 94. Not sure if he's developing a fever, because that could make your pulse go up, or he's just excited being on camera. But definitely 94 for a comfortable resting pulse is a bit high.
Finally, we got my antibiotic, and we think I'm gonna get to go home today.
Yay.
The real fun starts 3 days after that when I start developing a fever.
Oh no. When I have a patient leave, I give them things that they should anticipate, but also if things occur, what to do. And the first thing is if a fever starts, you gotta come right back or call us right away, because that is a sign that there's some kind of infection or new infection happening.
I am running a fever, which is
a bad thing to be running if you've been fighting 2 infections inside your body and you're immunocompromised. There's this fear of the infection reaching your bloodstream and you entering something called sepsis.
Yeah, so sepsis is definitely a concern. So sepsis and septicemia are 2 different things. Septicemia is when you start getting the bacteria actually, or an infection, in your bloodstream. Now, sepsis is the reaction of your body to the septicemia, where your body almost like overreacts, causes this huge inflammatory cascade where your blood vessels ultra dilate, your blood pressure starts dropping, potentially driving you to septic shock, which can cause organ failure, increased clotting. You could see why there's an emergent situation about to occur.
And to complicate things, I spent the day having diarrhea more times than I can count.
And that's also problematic because he's been on so many antibiotics at this point. It puts you at a high risk for developing Clostridium difficile infection, which is also known as C. diff, because one of the biggest risk factors for C. diff is taking antibiotics. The only way to know is to get a sample of the stool and send it out for C. diff toxin testing.
We get to the emergency room. My heart rate was 130 when I was sleeping.
So notice I was already paying attention to his heart rate before, but now it's going even higher because something's going on metabolically in his body. Part of that is his fever. When you have an infection and your fever is elevated, your pulse also goes up corresponding to your body temperature. Also, when you're dealing with an infection, your body requires more blood flow, the heart works harder.
My white blood cell count, usually around 9, was 14 the first time I was infected. Now is at 26.
So that is very high, and that's a sign that there is now a significant infection somewhere in the body.
I cannot stop pooping. They make me give them a sample of the poop, and they send me into the bathroom with a jar and a popsicle stick. And when I tell you that this was not something that was popsicle stickable, 12 days out from my wedding at this point. So I am diagnosed not with sepsis, not with a reoccurrence of my infection, but with something new. I have C. diff. C. diff is basically a super infectious diarrhea bug. It's something that you commonly can get when you're on too many antibiotics, and now you have the big bad poop disease.
The reason why antibiotics are a risk factor for the development of C. diff is because when you take antibiotics, you kill all the competing bacteria in the gut, and the antibiotics don't kill the C. diff, so the C. diff multiplies and therefore becomes a predominant strain, causing infection, all these problems.
It's super contagious, so anyone who comes in here has to wear special garb. Hand sanitizer doesn't work because it is a spore. You have to wash your hands with soap and water.
This is absolutely true. So any patient in the hospital that is being tested for C. diff or has already tested positive for C. diff gets put on something known as contact precaution, where everyone puts on a gown because the way that this is spread is through contact, basically touching it and then bringing it to your mouth. And as he said correctly, alcohol-based hand sanitizers don't work on the spore, and you actually have to physically wash your hands.
The medicine, goddamn, medicine is great. And I am feeling so good, I am ready to go home. But because this story needs another turn, my insurance company will not approve my medicine. I can't go home without my medicine.
I got discharged from the ER. We go downstairs. We pack up. We're ready to go home. Then go to the pharmacy and they go, oh, your insurance hasn't approved this. You're not allowed to leave. And we're like, oh, well, we've been discharged. And they're like, well, no, you shouldn't have been discharged. You got to go back upstairs immediately. And we go, hey, funny thing, I'm actually not allowed to leave yet. And the nurse looks at me and he's like, I checked you out already. So you're going to have to go back to the waiting room. And I'm like, good sir, I can't go back to the waiting room. That's going to be an 8-hour wait where I'm exploding out of my wounded buttocks. I can't go back. So they were trying to tell me that I had to go back to the waiting room, get readmitted, do the whole thing all over again.
Spread C. diff across the entire hospital.
Give it to everybody.
So just so people know, the treatment for C. diff, especially for what looks like to be a non-severe case, it's hard to know exactly, but for the treatment for a non-severe case of C. diff, the medication that we use is vancomycin or fidaxomicin. Ironically, vancomycin we usually only give through IV because when you take it orally, it doesn't get absorbed into your bloodstream. And as a result, if you have an infection somewhere and you take vancomycin, it won't get to where the infection is. However, if your infection is in the gut, vancomycin is perfect to be taken orally because it stays in the gut and treats your infection in the gut. There are obviously surgical situations where you need to act and do like a colectomy and actually take a part of the colon out. That's how bad C. diff can get. You can develop something known as toxic megacolon, very serious complication. But one of the unique things that we do to treat recurrent bouts of C. diff, which can happen in many patients, is doing a fecal transplant, where you actually go with a colonoscope and put fecal matter from a family member directly into the colon. That brings in a wide variety of bacteria. As a result, they compete with the C. diff, and the cure rates are actually pretty high. Side effects are pretty low, and it works for many people.
For 3 of these days, I am stuck in the emergency room because I don't think people realize this. Hospitals never recovered from COVID. And I don't just mean people getting sick from COVID, which, yeah, is still a thing, is still happening, but it's just this backlog of patients and more people getting sick. And
this isn't even just a COVID issue, by the way. This has been an issue. And that's why the biggest issue early on with COVID, like the first 2 months, where we saw our hospitals get just beyond overwhelmed. Like they were already overwhelmed. Now they were getting beyond overwhelmed. Why we're like, we need to figure out what's going on. Let's lock down and figure out what's happening, because otherwise, if our healthcare system completely breaks, then everyone is screwed.
The ER hallways, not the rooms, the hallways are lined back to back to back with beds. Everywhere you can see, every square inch of that place. And I'm stuck in the ER because the rest of the hospital is filled. It's called code red census.
And the problem is also more hospitals continue to close, and as a result, it puts more strain on the other hospitals.
Nurses are burnt out, they are quitting, hospitals are understaffed and overworked. So many of my nurses were traveling nurses who, this was their first day in California, let alone this hospital. I mean, they didn't know where things were, they're just trying their best. The American health system is failing us.
I know we like to really shit on the American healthcare system, and it is a disaster. I say it all the time. I just came back from France. I did a trip there presenting with Google and the WHO, and I spoke to a lot of their medical creators, doctors, nurses. They have their own problems, very similar to this, but on the other end of the spectrum because they're a nationally funded healthcare system. I talked to my colleagues in the NHS. They talk about the disaster that they're having with underfunding. People in Canada are having their own struggles. This is a problem universally, granted for different reasons, and I'm not saying that they're all equal. The problem is across the world. We need to really figure out this inequity that exists and stop the commercialization of healthcare, at least in this country.
Finally, for the 3rd time in a month, I was discharged from the hospital with 7 days to go until my wedding.
Wow.
It was time to get married.
Hey guys, so news update from the hospital. I'm out.
Yeah.
Get me out of here.
Let's go.
I was able to walk down the aisle
Yay.
and dance the night away and have a party beyond my wildest dreams.
That's so
but
awesome.
my ankle did swell up like crazy the morning after from dancing.
That happens.
Oops.
That's from gravity, not just from dancing, just from standing. Actually, the dancing probably decreased the swelling.
I got very lucky with how it went. I haven't really needed physical therapy. I've been able to just kind of work the strength back myself. So
Please be careful. That's the only message I'll leave you. we need
I appreciate it.
need you to continue staying happy and healthy. Despite the happy ending, that was a heavier video, so how about a laugh with a little bit of medical memes? Click here to check that out, and as always, stay happy and healthy. And congratulations to Zach.